I would encourage us to be able to continue to pray for those who are not with us. I don't know what we would do without our live streaming. There are so many people that are watching it, and I have to be careful because my mum's found it and she's listening. So I have to be very careful about what I say. But this morning, let's turn into Habakkuk chapter 2. And whether we get through this or not, well, the Lord knows. But I've titled this, You Think So, Think Again. You think so, think again. And I wonder today, how many of us have got secrets hidden away that we don't want anyone to find out about? You know, somewhere in our past, somewhere there's something we've done, something we've said that we've just pushed away in a cupboard, and we hope that no one discovers it. No one knows this thing about us. And often we'll take all sorts of steps to ensure that that secret remains private. And then we convince ourselves everything will be okay, nobody will know, no one will ever find out. And today's message hits on that very thought. If you think that, then think again. There's somebody who's privy to everything we say. There's somebody who's privy to everything that we do, and he will bring it to light, and he will reveal it for what it is. Previously, that we've looked at in Habakkuk, he's complained to God, God, you're not listening to me. God, you're not doing your job. You're allowing your people to continue on the way they are, and you won't answer me. And he complained. And God answered him. But it wasn't what he wanted to hear. It wasn't the way that he expected God to reply. And when God said, I'm going to use the Babylonians against you, they're going to be my instruments of judgment against you, Habakkuk found it very difficult to get his head around how God could use such a pagan people against his own people. And that's not what he was looking for. He expected that God would just wrap his people over the knuckles, and then they'd get back and repent and everything would be fine again. But no, God had chosen not to answer. So he had to reevaluate what he knew about his God, what he thought he knew with what he really knew about his God. And so he comes to a conclusion and decided, well, I'm going into my watchtower and I'm going to wait on God, see what he's going to say and what he's going to do. And we find in these verses a simple principle. And it's very simple. It says, be sure your sin will find you out. You reap what you sow. And the Babylonians were about to find this out. In our first few verses, we find it's a formal indictment in verses 6 to 8. But all the nations the Babylonians have hurt will laugh at them. They'll make fun of the Babylonians and say, how terrible it will be for the one that steals many things. How long will that nation get rich by forcing others to pay them? One day the people from whom you've taken money will turn against you. They'll realise what is happening and make you shake with fear. Then they will take everything you have. Because you've stolen from many nations, those who are left will take much from you. This is because you've killed many people, destroying countries and cities and everyone in them. God is saying to Habakkuk, this is what I'm going to do. It's a formal indictment, and it's against a nation, it's against a people. Even though God is using them as his instruments, he's saying to them, I have appointed a day where I will audit all the nations, and in Babylon in particular, for the things that they have done. Now, it's interesting when you have an audit, when the tax office decides to audit you if you've got a business. it's quite a headache, because if you failed to keep all your transactions and the receipts and everything else, guess what they'll do? They'll find it. They examine the books. They weigh it up. And they say, look, this is our recommendations. You're not a very good bookkeeper. You don't keep your accounts. And God is saying, I am the accountant. I'm going to open up the books. And I tell you, I'm a very good accountant. And I'm going to look at the debits, I'm going to look at the credits, and I'm going to see what you've done. And he says, I'm going to hold Babylon accountable. And that day of reckoning is going to come soon. Because the Babylonians were proud people. They believed they could do whatever they want. They could get away with anything they want. And these verses are basically saying, if that's what you think, then think again. If that's what you think again. A day's coming. Babylon had been ruthless in the way that they'd gone about taking other nations. They had raped, pillaged and plundered wherever they went. They took whatever they wanted and squashed any opposition. And so they had become conceited. They had become puffed up with their own abilities to fleece people of their wealth through extortion. They charged exorbitant interest rates on people who could ill afford to pay them. They revelled in their ability to take what was theirs in the first place. They were boastful in their theft of taking anything of value from people they conquered. And the question is asked, how long are you going to allow that, God, to continue? How long are you going to allow them to get away with it? How long are you going to allow them to keep what's not theirs? You see, God sees it as being a loan, but it came with very high interest rates. The comfort given to Habakkuk here is that Babylon might be the top dog today, if you like, but their turn would come and the tables would be turned and they would be on the receiving end. They'd overstepped the boundaries that God had permitted. And so judgment was going to come to this nation. Babylon would become a victim. They had plundered, but they won't get away with it. The reversal of roles would come about because they'd ruthlessly ravaged both lands and cities. Now they're going to experience the same. And we could be sitting here and looking at, say, oh, this is boring, Pastor. This is Babylon. This is ancient history. Well, you know, they thought they would get away with what they have done without any repercussions. And you might be thinking, well, what's that really got to do with me? Well, there's a message in here today too. You see, what secrets do we have hidden away in our own lives that we don't want people to find out? What things have you and I done that we've regretted and wish we could turn the clock back in time and chose not to do that very thing? Now, God's people, Judah, well, they were far from innocent when it came to doing some of the things that the Babylonians had done or were doing. They thought they were immune. They thought they could get away with it. They thought they wouldn't be exposed or judged. And I guess it comes down, if I'm an employer, if I'm in a position of a boss, the question I have to ask myself is, how well have I treated my employees? Have I taken advantage of them, not paid them what they were owed? Have I sought loopholes where I can get advantages from the government that are questionable, that wouldn't pass the pub test, really? As an employee, have I been or am I the best employee that I can be? Have I taken advantages of my boss, of my employer, to which I'm not entitled? You know, an extra 5 minutes here, extra 10 minutes here, a couple extra toilet breaks, slacking off when I'm supposed to work, all those sorts of things. I've got away with it. Or I think I've got away with it. Think again. Have I paid back my debts that were owed? Have I used people to get what I want? This challenges each one of us concerning our testimony and concerning our transparency as Christians. You see, it's very easy to point out, well, that person you need to keep away from because, hey, they'll rob you blind. But what about us? The things that we do, are we any different? We might say, hey, I won't rob anybody blind, but would I take advantage of a situation or a circumstance that presents itself? You see, I might think I've got away with it, but God says, think again. You see, I think of all the organisations who have ripped people off, taken advantage of vulnerable people, and think that they've got away with it. God says very clearly, think again. People may forget. Organisations may forget. Government bodies may forget. But God says, I will never forget. I keep a perfect record of all you do. There's no hiding away from it. I know when, I know how, I know what you do, I know why you did it, when you did it, and I will expose you. I will confront you. I will deal with you, so think again. That should be challenging to us. If we stop and evaluate, are there things that I've done that I think I've got away with, that I'm okay, nobody knows? He knows. He's keeping a perfect record, and there will be a day when it's exposed. As Numbers 32:23, does anyone know what that says? If you went to Sunday, this is one of the first things that my Sunday school teacher taught me. Be sure your sin will find you out. You see, we remember it. Is it true? It is true. Your sin, you'll be found out. You might be thinking, I've got away with it. But think again, no matter how things are unfair, they might seem unfair today, there's a day coming, just as it was for the Babylonians, when the tables would be turned on those who have gotten wealthy and rich from doing the wrong things. God says they'll be paid in kind. I look at our world, there's a lot of extortion. There's a lot of people taking advantage of others, taking things that don't belong to them. And we can get all uptight and everything else, but God says, hey, I've got this covered. I've got recorded the date, the time, the motives. I know exactly what was done, when it was done, why it was done. I will repay with interest. And that should be a comfort to those who are feeling disadvantaged or vulnerable. I might not be able to pay them back. I might not be able to have justice in a sense, but I know the one who's going to mete out the justice. And he said, I've got a day appointed. There's a day of reckoning coming. Leave it with me. There's also a false immunity in verses 9 through 11. How terrible it will be for that nation that becomes rich by doing wrong, thinking they live in a safe place and escape harm. Because you have made plans to destroy many people, you have made your own houses ashamed of you. Because of it, you lose your lives. The stones of the walls will cry out against you, and the boards that support the roof will agree that you are wrong. You see, God is challenging the thinking of these Babylonians. You think you can get away with doing the wrong thing. You think somehow you have an immunity, you have an agreement that makes you untouchable. I've got news. You're wrong. You're wrong. You better think again. You think because you see something, that you desire something, that you want something, you can just take it because there's nobody to stop you. Think again. You see, the Babylonians had such an exalted opinion of themselves. They thought they could take whatever they want, build up their mansions and wealth, provide themselves with a safe and secure environment where they believed that they were impregnable and immune from anyone touching what they had. They thought they were safe. History tells us that Nebuchadnezzar made his house of all the plundered remains of the conquered cities that he trampled underfoot. And God says to this great empire, you may set yourself up like an eagle upon a mountain and think that nobody will touch you and nobody will get to you. You may make yourself luxurious by the spoil of your enemies and your victim. But God says, think again. You may have carried many people away with you. But he says in verse 11, the very stone of your habitation or your house will cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. In other words, the very timber within your house will testify that what you are doing to those around you. And it's not difficult to see what the Babylonians' problem was. And it was pride. It was covetousness. It was a sense of entitlement. It was a problem in their day. You know what? It's still a problem in our day and age. People feel entitled. People are covetous. We haven't changed. It's still part of human nature. Let me ask you today, are you content? Let's be honest. Are you content? Well, that's deafening. Are you content? Are you dissatisfied? What is it that I could get you that would make you content? What would you like? If it was in my power to give it to you, what would you like that would make you content? At least for 5 minutes. I know some would say, if you could finish in 5 minutes, I'd be happy, or I'd be content. But what is it that would make us content? Man, the silence is deafening. Because if I ask you, you'd probably say, oh, the car needs replacing, the house needs maintenance, I could do with a new boat, I could go on a holiday, I could do with some new clothes, I could do with, a big bank account. Would that make you content? All right. But if I'm covetous, if I'm desiring something else, there's a thing within me that says, I've just got to have it. I've just got to have it. And there's that sense of entitlement that we're not satisfied with what we've got. We've got to have more and more. That we're entitled to these things. We deserve them. And we should have them. And you know what? It doesn't help that we're bombarded through our media processes that, you deserve the best. You deserve to pamper yourself. You need to look after number one. You need this. And you need this. And then you need this. Do we fall for it? Do we? When we're vulnerable, yes. Our processes start thinking, well, you know what, that's not a bad thing. If I just went out and got it, yeah, it'll be good. We see, we desire, we want, we must have because we deserve it. And we buy or get ourselves into debt for something that, well, it's not really a necessity. But nonetheless, we've got to have it. This is covetousness 101. And our society today promotes covetousness in big ways. And Christians are not immune from covetousness. Bigger and better houses, bigger and better cars, bigger and better wardrobes, bigger and better bank accounts, investments, bigger and better churches, maybe winning the lottery. We have Christian preachers who proclaim a prosperity gospel where they say, God wants you to have these things. All you got to do is ask him and you'll be given everything you want. Well, that's not what's in my Bible, but anyway, it works for some people. But what does God say to us this morning? Are we guilty of covetousness, of desiring the things the world has to offer? Doing whatever we can to protect and preserve what we've accumulated? Thinking these things are ours, believing we're entitled to them, thinking we're safe from others from getting them? God says, if you think these things, then think again. That's what he's saying to the Babylonians. They took whatever they wanted. They built luxurious palaces. They had it all. And they thought they're untouchable. No one was going to take it away. And sometimes we build our houses that way. We build our own empires that way, thinking nobody else can take it. That's what we live for. God says, if that's what you're thinking, then think again. Because it's a flawed illusion. How terrible it will be for the nation that kills people to build a city, that wrongs others to start a town. The Lord All-Powerful will send fire to destroy what those people have built. All the nation's work will be for nothing. Then just as the water covers the sea, people everywhere will know the Lord's glory. In other words, God is saying to these people, your arrogance knows no end. You think you're so great and so good. You think you're so superior to everybody else around you. You boast about your empire. You boast about your achievements, forgetting that what you've done is build a city. You've built an empire on other people's wealth, on other people's blood, sweat and tears. You took advantage of them and you think it's okay? Think again. Think again. And God's message is, okay, go ahead with what you're doing, because it's going to make one huge bonfire in the end. All that you've built using other people's things, shedding their blood to build your mansions and enjoy living in luxury, it's going to be burned up. Think about all that time, all that effort, all that energy that is spent in building homes and making them safe and beautiful, having every possible technology available. And it makes a statement, look what we've got. Now, am I against having a home and caring for it? No, I'm not. But sometimes our homes can be idols that we worship. We give all our waking attention to impress others, simply to say a statement, look at what I've got, look at who I am. These Babylonians were no different. Conquered city after city, taking what they want from the rich and poor, being wealthy. They took their jewels, their temples, brought them back to Babylon. For what? To make a bigger and bigger city. To make a place where everyone wanted to come and visit, a place that would be the envy of the world at the time. The question asked, what good is it going to do? God says, all it's going to do is to make more and more materials for the bonfire, where everything you invested in, taking away from others, using it for your own purposes, guess what? It's going up in smoke. Your city, all its monuments, everything you've built, dedicated to your gods, I've appointed a day where it all be gone. Now it's interesting, because we have recorded in history, this is Babylon. This is just one of the places in Babylon. But this great city was 6 square kilometres. It had walls 106 metres high. They were 26 metres thick. So what one historian has said, along the top of the main palace there, where Nebuchadnezzar was, it was so wide and so big that they had chariot races with 6 chariots running abreast. That gives you an idea of the opulence and the amount of time and materials that were used. The walls were 10 metres below the ground, so that it made it impossible to dig under the city. There were 250 watchtowers, 53 temples, 180 altars to the god Ishtar. Ishtar was worshipped as the goddess of both love and war. She was associated with aspects of these areas such as sex, fertility and political power. Her influence extended well beyond her primary role. She was worshipped as the goddess of thunderstorms as well as the goddess of food, preservation and storehouses such as granaries. So this is what they worshipped. A magnificent city. It was one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Everybody in the known world had to go there and see these wonderful gardens that Nebuchadnezzar had created from other people's materials. He built them. Isaiah the prophet in chapter 14 verses 3 through 23 gives a graphic description of what God has said will happen to the nation of Babylon. And any individual that sets themselves up at the expense of riding roughshod over people will suffer the same fate. And I encourage you to read it because it's pretty specific. Babylon is named. Now understand that Babylon symbolises a worldly system. And that power that rejects Christ and his authority and lifts himself up as gods. The same is happening in our own world today. Man is elevating himself to the platform of being a god and in charge of his own destiny. In other words, of being able to do whatever he wants. And God says, think again. If that's what you're thinking, that you're immune from any consequences, think again. I'm going to balance the books. I'll look at all the transactions. I'll make my judgments according to the evidence I find. It won't be in your favour. There won't be exemptions. There'll be no immunity. You'll be weighed and found wanting. You'll be dealt with in the same way you've dealt with others. And right through we see indeed how Nimrod had built a kingdom in Babylon, taken a power that didn't belong to him. It was destroyed. The Babylonian conquered the known world. It's passed away. One day, again, Babylon will set up its kingdom, according to Revelation 7 and 18, but it will be replaced by Christ's kingdom on earth. And it has to give way for the kingdom of Christ as it comes. Now, when the Messiah rules in his earthly kingdom, the knowledge of the Lord will be worldwide. Everybody will know of him. So extensive and abundant will be the knowledge, it will be like water covering the sea. This will occur after all the false knowledge of the Babylonian character and aspirations is removed. God's glory will be revealed. And so God's message to us today in this modern era is that we're going to go through some trials. We're going to face some difficult situations. But you know, there's a day coming that God promises there'll be no more pain. There'll be no more exploitation. There'll be no injustice. There'll be no cruelty, no sorrow, no sinfulness. Because the Lord shall reign and the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the God. Right now, this is not the case. Man is doing everything he can reject, to remove, to cancel out any knowledge of God. Yet this message tells us that Jesus will triumph over all these injustices, and we can be rest assured it's going to happen. The futile indulgence in verses 15 through 17. How terrible for the nation that makes its neighbours drink, pouring from the jug of wine until they are drunk, so that they can look at their naked bodies. You Babylonians will be filled with disgrace, not respect. It's your turn to drink and fall to the ground like a drunk person. The cup of anger from the Lord's right hand is coming around to you. You'll receive disgrace, not respect. You hurt many people in Lebanon, but now you'll be hurt. You killed many animals there, and now you must be afraid because of what you did to that land, those cities, and the people who lived in them. What did you make of this message? Does it apply to us today? Is there anything I can take from these verses? Or is it just gobbledygook? There's so much in here. And as a straightforward message, it has a message to our people today. Do not allow yourselves to be carried away with your indulgence with alcohol, with its ability to make you forget the things you've done. Now, how did the Babylonians become so great, so powerful, and yet not have much of a conscience? How did they do it? To just go into city after city, village after village, take what they want, burn down, take the materials, take people away. How were they able to do it? What was their driving force? Well, history tells us. Their push and determination for conquest, for possessions, came because of their extreme reliance on alcohol. By consuming as much alcohol as they could, it made them think they were invincible and superior to others, and they felt entitled to take whatever was there. Alcohol was a driving force. They didn't think rationally. They just thought they were better than everybody else. It's there, I can take it. That's what alcohol does. The alcohol made them seem invincible. It gave them that extra courage and determination to take what they wanted without any fear of consequence. It gave them a false courage, and they had to maintain this by drinking daily to allay any fears and anxieties that they had. In other words, intoxication became a way of life for the Babylonians. Now, they built a magnificent empire. How did it end? Remembering alcohol was the daily indulgence. It gave them what they wanted. What brought about their end? According to Scripture in Daniel 5, they were party mode. They were having an orgy. They were having an all-night affair. And guess what? They were drunk. And they didn't become aware of the enemy who had snuck in and put them to the sword. They were too drunk to do anything. Once again, intoxicated. It got them what they wanted, but it also, they paid an awful price in the end. They were not aware of the enemy there. And God sent them a warning, and they were not prepared. They were drunk on the job. It was their demise. It allowed them to indulge in wasteful practices. They didn't use or make proper use of the resources they had from all their conquests. They wasted it in useless ways. I guess the message that's coming through, drunkenness and alcoholic consumption entices people into sexual sin. If you look at verse 15, it says, making people drunk so they could look on their nakedness. Alcohol is known to lower people's inhibitions to do things they normally wouldn't. And God says, you Babylonians have taken advantages of others by encouraging them to drink, to shame, to humiliate, to embarrass others for your own benefit. But I'll make sure the tables are turned, and you'll be like a drunk who is sick, constantly spewing things from your mouth. That is what you'll be like to others who you have taken advantage of. So there's a challenge to us, even as believers. And I know there's a lot of disagreements about the use of alcohol by many Christians. But the Bible makes it abundantly clear that we're not to allow any substance to have control and overpower us, to make us vulnerable, to succumb to temptation that we'd never allow if we were sober. My own personal thing is, the only spirit that we need as Christians is the Spirit of God within us. He is the one who will equip and strengthen and provide us with all we need to deal with things in this life and the next. And I can't understand, why would we settle for something inferior which cannot guarantee or deliver what it promises? God does through the Holy Spirit. But so many feel that temptation to remove anxiety, to remove worry. Oh, I'll just have a sip. I'll just another sip and another sip. And then before they know it, they're not in control. They're in situations that they shouldn't be in. And this is the message that we could take away. Don't indulge and let these things control what we want. Looking at these verses, there's a steady progress downwards. It starts with greed, follows by injustice, followed by violence to get what you want, followed by seduction and perversion. And when people cannot find what they want through physical possession, they begin to look elsewhere to find their security. And that will often be in relationships. The problem with these relationships, it's usually governed by whatever the world standards are at the time, and will not give people what they want to have and maintain a lasting relationship. Often it will become a relationship based on deception, based on other people's own desires and pleasures, which is really a terrible substitute for the real thing. For real love is self-sacrificing rather than self-serving. God turns the tables. They're going to reap what they sow. And so we find that they were guilty of a lot of things, even taking, it mentions Lebanon there, the violence they did. God has determined Babylon will become desolate because of the damage that they've left behind. There's a day coming. Very quickly, the last one, a failed idolatry. An idol does no good because a human made it. It is only a statue that teaches lies. The one who made it expects his own work to help him, but he makes idols that can't even speak. How terrible it will be for the one who says to a wooden statue, "Come to life." How terrible it will be for the one who says to a silent stone, "Get up." It cannot tell you what to do. It's only a statue covered with gold and silver. There's no life in it. The Lord is in his holy temple. All the earth should be silent in his presence. And the challenge here that it asks is, why do you put your trust in an idol? Why do you put your trust in something that you have made? What benefit is it going to give you when it's all said and done? Can what you've made speak to you? Can what you've made hold a conversation with you? Can what you made give you words of wisdom and comfort and encourage you with its wisdom? It's all pointless. It makes no sense. Idols have nothing to offer. They may look good, they may be beautiful, but they have nothing to offer or satisfy those who have them. You might be thinking, well, Pastor, that's not a problem for me. I don't have a wooden stone or anything else that I bow down and worship. I don't talk to idols. Well, hang on a minute. Idolatry is not just bowing down to idols. It is trusting in what one has made and therefore in one's power to create and sustain. If I put my trust in bank accounts, in homes, in businesses, in organisations, then God says, you're an idolater. Whoa. Yeah, that's what God says. I haven't got that idol of stone or wood, and I'm not asking to speak to, but hey, I've made my own idols that I worship. My big fat bank account, my lovely mansion, and the things that go in it. It's idolatry. Do you trust God more than you trust what you've made with your hands? What are you relying on more? Your God or the things that you've created and have? Is that what you put your trust in? If we don't want to follow the God of the Bible, and it's very easy, we say, hey, yeah, I follow God, but if I don't want that type of God, I design my own. I manufacture my own God. I manipulate that God to do what I want so that he makes me happy. So we come up with a sort of God in our own minds that we would want. But that's not the God of the Bible. And in verse 20, by comparison to these dead man-made idols, God is presented in his temple. He's alive, and the words that he speaks provide life and knowledge, and he puts life into man. So instead of calling dead idols to awake and to arise, the earth and its inhabitants should stand in awe and wonder and worship before him as he executes judgment upon Babylon and the earth's inhabitants. Verse 20 says, it should give us encouragement to know there's a God in heaven who knows what you're going through right now, who knows your heartaches, who knows your concerns, who knows your pain, your temptations and your tribulation. God in heaven knows and sees it. What does that tell me? You know, it looks as though our world has gone mad. People are doing what they want and getting away with it. But God's saying here one thing: I'm in control. I'm in control. He sits on this throne. God's in the driving seat. And in his own time he will answer. And he says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. He needs us to wait. He needs to trust that he will repay those who do the wrong thing. So do I have idols in my life this morning? What do I turn to for strength and security in life? Is it money? Do you think that if you only have enough money, things are going to be great? They're going to be wonderful? Is it other people? Do you think that somehow your friends, your family will help you get by? Is it success, fame? Is it your own strength and ability? Whatever that may be. Do you think that if you get all these things in order, somehow you will manage? You may think so. But God says to morning, think again. Without God in life, there'll always be a vacuum that needs to be filled. And if we don't fill it with God, then it will be filled with other things that we think will satisfy us. And it will not be enough. Habakkuk began his book with questions and complaints. God, why aren't you doing something about the injustice and all the wickedness that's happening in our community? Then he came to understand God was doing something about it, even if he couldn't understand God's wisdom in the way he chose to do it. But he also realized that he could trust God's ways. Since God is on his throne, instead of questions, instead of accusations for what God isn't doing in this world, all you and I can do is stand in awe and wonder, trusting God's wisdom, even when we don't understand all his ways. Because he says very clearly this morning, I am on the throne. I am in control. I know what I'm doing, and I am working in this world. Trust me, I've got this. And if you get nothing else from the message this morning, I hope you get that. Our God is more than able to satisfy and meet our needs. He's more